Welcome back. Today, the heartbeat. So welcome back then. So today we are going to finally rebuild the Alpha Heartbeat. I've managed to get the crank and all the shells I needed in a week where I thought I couldn't get them. So I managed to get shells and the thing. I had to go to Alpha for it, but we won't talk about that. That's a dark area. So what we're going to do today, first we're going to tidy the shop up because it's an absolute state. So we're going to give it a quick tidy up, get all the steel and loose bits out of the way, and then we're going to crack on rebuilding that engine. Hopefully by the end of the day it should be rebuilt, put back with its gearbox. It's not going to be with a clutch or flywheel because I've still got to get them bits yet. It'll basically be put back together so we can mock it and drop it in to the engine bay. We've still got to do a bit of welding in the engine bay so I know that when I take the brace now it's not just going to collapse on itself, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But first, workshop tidy and then crack on with that engine. So that's the workshop nice and tidy again. It's been bugging me for a while, but I've been too busy doing everything else. So I'm going to move the engine out a bit so we've got a bit more room to work on it, and then we're going to crack on. But before we do, there's two questions I need for someone to answer. Do we keep the sunroof? Because it's a sunroof car. I was thinking it might look quite cool, maybe tint it, or tint it maybe like a sort of speckly white or like a green. And what was the other one? Forgot there. Oh yeah, silly me. A name. We need a name. I know everyone names their cars and I should name it myself, but throw me suggestions. I'm open to hearing more. All what I've come up is Widowmaker because it probably will kill someone. Hopefully not me. Well, hopefully it won't kill anyone. But I thought Widowmaker sort of stands out, sort of a frightening name. Or Lilith. But I'm going to leave it down to you lot. So remember, it's having an Alfa Romeo Heart and it's a Rover Metro, so maybe come up with something with them. I haven't really come up with anything with them, and it's going to be a pickup, so it's open to ideas. So I'll leave that to you lot and see what we come back with, and I'll pick one sort of the end of August time. So we've got plenty of time to get suggestions in, so let's get cracking. So, I've got our torque settings now, just waiting on a friend to send them me. So now we've got the torque settings, what we're going to do is we're going to get the crank back in with its bottom, like it's half of its main bearing gauges. And we'll assemble that and then we'll attach the com rods, which for anyone that doesn't quite know how an engine works, the com rods is basically what connects to the piston. Not trying to belittle anyone or make anyone feel silly. So basically you've got the crank that moves up and down, and it's sort of like that, and basically the com rods, the pistons sit on that. And basically obviously then they go up and down, so we're going to slowly rebuild the bottom of this engine. I'm just waiting for the main bearing torque settings. Obviously I'm not doing the top end. We don't need to. The gentleman I bought the engine from, I've only just done the top end, and as long as once it's all timed up today it turns freely, in my opinion it's fine. It will come to a stage where it comes back out and I might pull it all apart again because I'm going to spray it green, so it might be the fact, obviously, when I pull it apart, that it might just be easier instead of masking bits up. But for now, we're just going to leave the top end alone. We shouldn't need to mess with it. Even if we do, we don't have to replace anything. The head gasket's brand new, and the bolts aren't stretch ones, so we should be fine on that. So let's crack on and building this engine back up.
Shut up and sit down.
So, what you just saw me do then was put it together wrong. I forgot I've got to put the bottom conrod shells on first. It's been a long time since I've had to rebuild an engine from this sort of stage, so I remember what I've got to do. I just cleaned up all the silicone I put on. I am using sealant on them all. The one gasket on the side alone is near enough £100 for a gasket, and in my opinion that's ridiculous, where sealant will do perfectly fine. If it comes to it where I actually need to get it and it's not holding oil or it's leaking or something, we'll get the seal, but for now sealant will do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move this crank so I can get all the bottom conrod shells on. What I might do is I'll probably assemble all the conrods fully onto here, so all I've got to do is move them to torque them up. So let's get cracking with that. So, that's the com rod shells and main bearing shells, camshaft and bottom end housing, whatever you want to call it in. For people that obviously don't work on cars, I know a lot of you do because you're following this journey, otherwise you have no clue what I was doing. Obviously, torque settings have to be precise, so I've got them all written down. The M8s, they were only 30 just a click, but the M10s were actually 20 and then a further 80 degrees. So that's why it looked like I clicked them all and then went back over them. It's because I did. I will more than likely go over everything again, set it to 20 Newton meters and just blast a lot. I'm a stickler for over tightening things. It's a bad habit I need to get out. So now that's all that back together. What we're going to do is clean this off and we'll put the sump back on, and then we will continue throwing all the auxiliaries on. So when this comes off this engine stand, all I should have to put on is the crank, flywheel to engine seal, and then I can just throw all the auxiliaries on. Then basically I want it so when it goes to the car, it's a complete engine, alternator, turbo and all that on it, so I can officially find out how much space I actually have. Now looking at it, I've got loads, because this engine, even with the gearbox, is tiny compared to the Rover one that come out of it. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to crack on building this. It is just going to be pretty much an engine rebuild episode. There will be a little bit of welding over there, but that's only when I need to set them engine bars out. So we'll see what time it is once we've got this, and we'll see how we go. So let's get cracking. So this is recorded after last week. When we were rebuilding the engine, I've obviously gone back over the footage today, and I seem to be missing quite a lump. There's no actual film of me taking the rocket cover off with the cam on it. No idea why the camera was still recording. I don't know what's happened there. It's recorded the rest of the day, but hasn't recorded that specific segment. So before there's any confusion, this is the next week. Basically what has happened with the head is 4 bolts have become defretted, so because it's an aluminium head, they threaded out. I do explain that we're helicoiling on, which we will do. So I am sorry that it's missing. I have no idea why. I have no thing. The camera was gone, memory card was full, battery was full. Just changed the battery. So unless I didn't push record, but when I looked up it was recording, so I have no idea what's happened. So I am sorry that that bit's not in last week's video, but it's not a lot I can do about it. So that's bad news. 4 out of, what is it, 8, 9, 10 bolts, whatever it is, holds the top valve cover, whatever you want to call it, basically the one that holds the top cam in. The head's actually lost its thread. So I've got another head here. I'll either get this one skimmed and pressure tested and use this one, take all the valves out, or we'll helicoil this one. Not decided yet, I will think over it on the week. I know people in the comments will scream, don't helicoil it. It's my personal preference, I don't want to helicoil it either. So it might just be getting that one pressure tested and we'll use that. So we're going to crack on now. We're not timing it, there's no point, because obviously I can't get it right. And we're just going to carry on throwing all the bits on it, get this engine as assembled as possible. It's going to have to come out again and back on its engine stand, but on the upside we will know everything's done. The bottom end is now completely done. It gives us a chance to take all the head off and that to make sure that's all okay. That's all it is. I trust the lad. This could have happened to anyone. It's alley on alley with steel bolts, so they just pull threads anyway. So let's get cracking with that.
Shut up and sit down.
So, as you can see, most of the engine is back together. Like I said, we're not timing it. I've decided I'm going to helicoil them. 1, it's cheaper, and 2, it's actually a brand new head. I've just spoken to the person I bought it off, and that's actually a brand new head. I've also looked, it can be quite a common issue on alley heads, just pulling a thread out and just over tightening them by accident or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to order a helicoil kit and basically helicoil them. But turbo's on, inlet manifold's on. They're not tight, there's no point tightening them, they're not staying on, the engine's come back out and it's come back apart. So there's no point going full hog and tightening everything down. I can't seem to locate an alternator bracket. I'm not sure, maybe I'm missing it or maybe I've just put it down somewhere. But what I'm going to do now is this engine is pretty much at the point where it's the right sort of size. The only thing that's obviously missing is the alternator. And I've got a funny little pump. This thing, no idea what it is. The power steering on these is electric. It's not the aircon pump because the aircon pump would have different fixings. I'm thinking maybe it's an oil pump. But I'm not 100% sure. And I can't seem to find a place where there's 3 bolts where it bolts from behind. So for now, this is as far as we're building the engine up. Like I said, I only need it built to a rough size. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to just clear some space, bring the engine hoist over, basically take it off this, and basically soft mount the gearbox. And what I mean by soft mount is basically just 2 or 3 bolts. There'll be no flywheel on it, so it'll literally just be put on and put in place. Obviously the start motor and that connects that, but we're not going to bother with that. We just need it assembled-ish, so we know where it is. I've got a drive shaft here as well, basically the half shaft. For people that obviously work on cars, they know what that is, but for people that don't, the half shaft is basically for the longer side of the car. So obviously you've got engine, gearbox. Well, the gearbox is quite close to that side, so it doesn't need a half shaft, so it just has a little drive shaft. The other side has something called, some cars have a half shaft, some have a solid shaft. But on the Alfa it's a half shaft, so basically it goes straight into the gearbox, mounts to the back of the engine. I'm assuming it's that side on this. Mounts to the back of the engine, and then basically another little drive shaft comes off it to connect it to the wheels. Now obviously the car being the way it is, that will need to go back on because I need to know how far it is. So like I said, go to the engine hoist, we'll clear some space and we'll crack on putting that together. So let's get cracking. Right, so as you can see, it's in. It actually sits a little bit taller than I thought it would. Obviously the turbo will be mounted downwards on the new system, or away from it. So I can get away with the turbo, that's not going to catch. Drive shafts actually line up quite nicely. This one's not too far. There's a little plastic bracket that's stopping me from pushing it backwards. The only problem is the other side. It's quite close to the chassis rail. It is really close to the chassis rail. So I think I've got a couple of different ways I can fix it. This is just throwing them out, this is just ideas. I'm not saying I'm going to go with it now. The main idea of getting it in today was to see if it'll interfere with my shock absorbers. Well, the gearbox side won't. It should be nowhere near my shocks. The other side maybe, I'm not too sure if it'll interfere. The bracket, I'm thinking the bracket actually fits off the other bracket that's on the other side. Once I figure out what the other little pump is, I'll have a better idea what I can do. So I think the way we're gonna do it is the gearbox side will come off and have its own separate engine bar, basically off the subframe, and basically have its own engine bar. It's a nice easy one. The cam belt and that sort of side is going to be a little bit more different. It's a lot tighter. I'd like it if I could pull it over, like towards me a bit, but unfortunately the gearbox sits and slaps smack bang onto the thing. So I've still got to wiggle it around a bit, like I can, there's still a little bit of give, I can lower it down a bit, but then, the belt on the other side catches and things like that. So I'm unsure. I'm going to carry on looking at the minute, move it around a bit and see what we can do. But it must actually sit taller than the Rover engine, because there's no actual reason for it not to fit. So it must just sit slightly higher than the Rover engine, which is a bit of a pain, because the look I'm going for won't look right with a big power hump in the middle. But we'll crack on. We'll have a look. So, that's the Rover. The Alpha engine fits. It needs modifications to the subframe, which I knew anyway, so we'll get cracking with them next time we're here, once we put the coilovers in, so we know they're in. We'll have to make an alternator bracket, which is fair enough. As I was expecting to at least have to make one bracket. It wouldn't keep me entertained if I didn't. And an oil pump bracket, but I think I've actually got an oil pump, but I'm unsure. We'll find out. Like I said, roadmap for the channel going forward is the Metro, the bike, and then there will, obviously, we can keep going, obviously, if we can. Hopefully we can, fingers crossed. You lot have been a massive support so far, so hopefully it keeps growing. We'll do something the similar sort of size, maybe rear wheel drive it, I don't know yet. We'll have a think once close to the time. I know 3 cars I want to do, so we'll pick one and we'll go from there. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please drop a like. So drop a comment, drop your name suggestion for the car in the comments. I'm going to let you lot choose. I'll pick out the best 3, and then I'll basically put it in the description, basically 1, 2 or 3 or something like that, and then you lot can vote again and we'll come up with that. And it will be on the back of the car and probably on the front, you know, like they do like the little symbols on the side of the car, like Petroforni and all that crap on iron cars. We'll put it on the side as well so everyone knows who she is. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Drop a like, drop a comment, and feel free to subscribe. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.